Divide and conquer, part 3. What are we talking about when we say divide and conquer? What we're talking about is the fact that much of the music that you might want to learn is uneven in terms of its difficulty throughout the piece. There are passages that are really fairly simple. There are other passages that may be quite daunting, and the difference between them in terms of technical challenge and need of practice and rehearsal is dramatically different. So it doesn't make sense to run through every piece beginning to end and give every section the same amount of work because it simply isn't a good use of your time. It is not strategic. So one of the first jobs that we want to do when we're encountering a new piece is to divide it up and figure out who within the piece needs what kind of work and how much work. And you can divide it up any way you want to. The way I like to divide it up is by what I call playable and unplayable passages. And what I mean by that is a playable passage is a set passage where you can do a reasonable job if you take the tempo down slowly enough. In other words, there are not really any perplexing problems of how to play it as long as you get it down slow enough. And an example of a piece that is more in this category is the A-flat impromptu of Schubert from Opus 142. You've probably heard this. So, as long as I go slowly enough and read carefully, no real issues here. Yes, some double flats that might drive you crazy the first time you see them, an ornament here or there. But really in this first section, very, very little that would ever require you to stop and have to solve too many problems. In the trio, maybe, depending on your level of experience. We have that thing. How those right-hand arpeggios are laid out. Okay, maybe you need to go through and figure out, where you move your thumb and where the groups start. But they're nice and diatonic and triadic, and they fit beautifully under the hand. So maybe after a short amount of work, that becomes a playable passage as well. So Schubert A-flat impromptu. Mostly, quote, playable. Now, when we get to the Chopin ballades, they have unplayable passages in them in the sense that you can't really get around those passages until you've done quite a bit of problem-solving work in terms of grouping and fingering and centering, especially. And I never consider fingering separate from grouping. The idea that we can write in fingering and not write in grouping, that you have finger numbers all through your score but no symbols for how to group it, is completely illogical to me, because the fingering is a result of how you group. When you let go and when you drop into the piano determines then the fingering that you're going to use. So I've done a whole video on grouping, and in unplayable sections, really the first thing I want to start looking at is how I group the passages. So this is the F minor ballade of Chopin, the 4th ballade, and they're all incredible pieces, and the codas of all these ballades are always pretty unplayable. They require a lot of problem solving to figure out. Once you get into it, of course, you see how beautifully laid out they are for the piano, because, of course, Chopin is the most pianistic of all composers. He understood how to move around. But the way it looks on the page can be somewhat consternating. So this one here, this coda to the F minor ballade, again, depending on your level of experience, it's likely that you will need to do a lot of problem solving first. For example, the way the triplets are, the first note in the right hand is alone, and then the middle note of the triplet is a double note, and then a single note. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, with the second note always being a double note. this seems illogical because the middle note of a triplet should be weaker than the first note of the triplet. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But he's given it this, by making the note double, he's giving it this power, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Also, the double note is always in the outside of the hand. It's generally 5 and then some other finger. So it's the outside of the hand, the weak side of the hand. And given that it's a double note, it's spreading your hand out and making it weaker. So one of the problem-solving things that I would do here is I would surface after the first note of the triplet. So there, let go, and go center on this. And play that as a 2-note phrase. One more time. He changes it to the third note right there just to keep you confused. That small release that allows me to group and play the double note dropping into it, that is so small up to tempo, but I can feel the difference that I'm free and I can come straight down on that double note rather than reaching sideways for it. So that's a really good example of something I would have to work at on a meticulous level before I start putting this passage together. Another one would be these famous chromatic thirds. In the right hand is over diminished harmony, of course, as chromatic thirds tend to be. And again here, if you've not played a lot of chromatic thirds passages, this fingering will feel really weird to you. Fortunately, again, once you really get into Chopin's thirds fingerings, they're so great. They fit beautifully. Likewise, the thirds etude fits beautifully. However, it's unlikely that a younger student the first time through would just see this and know how it should feel. So there we go with a couple of examples of some work that needs to be done before these passages become playable. Now, for myself, I like to go straight for the jugular vein of the unplayable passages and sort of attack them aggressively before I ever play the easier part, before I ever want to put the piece together, before I ever play from beginning to end. So my strategy is I'll identify those unplayable passages and then go to them and work out every problem, every grouping, every fingering, and then determine from there if there's any kind of intermediate rehearsal steps that I need to do. Do I need to practice getting into the thirds? Do I need to do some hands alone? Do I need, is there a rhythmic problem I need to count so it's clear in my head? So that eventually all those problems will be solved and I can put that unplayable passage together. The goal is that the unplayable passages could be solved, worked out, and gotten to a modest slow tempo that is equal to a modest tempo of the rest of the piece. The goal being, that one tempo for the whole thing so that I can start my rehearsal. So that's part 3, divide and conquer. We'll get into more details of problem solving next time. See you later.